doing a review for my favorite show, The 100. This would be Season 3, Episode 12, entitled Demons. So I think I would describe tonight's episode as kind of meh. It was okay, but it wasn't that good, and I had a few problems with it, but not enough that I hated the episode. So basically, two storylines tonight. What was going on in Arcadia, and what was going on in Polis. We'll start with Arcadia. So tonight's episode starts out in a cave with Harper, Miller, and Brian. And Miller is telling this ghost story about the station, and it's your basic killer with a hook story that apparently took place on the Ark. Or maybe it didn't, it's just a legend. You know, he's trying to scare Brian or trying to scare Harper. At one point, Miller and Brian, they go outside the cave, and then Harper starts hearing things. He starts, like, getting scared, and my attitude was, you know, I get how they're trying to tell a different story. It's sort of like maybe like a Friday the 13th slash or ghost story, but it just kind of fell out of place, especially with Harper going, okay, I'm not scared. Oh, you got me, right? Like a victim in a horror film. And it's like, oh, come on. They are being hunted by the Chip cult. You know, they got all their friends, got turned over by this thing. And at the same time, there's a lot of friction between them and the Grounders. Yeah, the blockade ended, but you gotta figure there's still probably some Grounders who want to kill them. And Harper, she's been on the ground forever, so I think she would have been more guarded. She wouldn't be some blonde in a horror film. She'd probably assume that whatever the noise is, if it's not Brian and Miller, it's not some hook-handed guy, it's one of their enemies. And that's who it was. So, warning, spoilers. We'll get into that. So, something happens to Harper. We don't find out. She just lets out a scream like a blonde in a horror film. And then we go back to Clark and her group. They're headed toward Arcadia, which has been abandoned by the Chip cult, which is another thing I really have to pay more attention to in these episodes, because it's like, at what point did they realize there was no one there? I mean, yeah, it sort of makes sense that Allie wanted to take everyone out, but at the same time, how do they know that, you know, there wasn't a trap there? It's like, oh, everyone's left. And it was like, has everyone left? Allie didn't think, I should keep a few people here in case some of them try to come back. You know, what if Wick shows up again? We could get him. He's Wick isn't coming back. Which is a shame, because that's a loose end I think they need to cut. Which, you know, they cut one tonight, and we'll get into that. Once again, spoilers. So anyway, they go back, and they're trying to get some equipment to take a better look at the chip, and they figure out it's voice activated, and you have to say some Latin phrase, which, once again, I wish I had paid more attention to so I could say it, because it comes back up later, for those of you who've seen the episode. So anyway, they figure there's this Latin phrase, Serpiles Famulis. I don't speak Latin, but, you know, it would activate the chip. And that's going on. Octavia goes back to her quarters room that she shared with Lincoln to find this map that Lincoln has so they can find Luna. And she kind of breaks down crying, and Jasper's like, hey, it's okay, you know, you love the guy. And she's like, no, I'm a warrior, I don't cry until the war is over. And then, you know, Jasper leaves her, he comes back, and his head's kind of split open, he's bleeding, he falls over, and then in comes this character like Grounder gear with a gas mask, and he takes on Octavia and overcomes her, which was kind of a surprise, you know, because Octavia's, you know, warrior princess, that this guy was able to best her. But when you find out who it is, I'm just gonna say it's Emerson. I made that prediction last week that when they were showing the previews for it, yeah, I figured it was going to be Emerson, and it was Emerson. And, you know, if you looked on the 100 Wikia, they had it credited as Emerson. So it was like, I made the prediction, and I looked up on the 100 Wikia, and it's like, oh, Emerson. Kind of took out the suspense of who this guy is. So now you know it's Emerson, he's back for revenge. And when I saw, you know, Jasper fall down with the blood on, it's like, oh, good, that means Harper is still alive. Because I figured, you know, they didn't kill Jasper, that means Emerson wants to capture everyone And you could kind of see where it was going. You know, you knew that Emerson was going to round up everyone, and at some point he was going to have a standoff with Clark. And he had something where he would be able to kill them all off in front of her, which was the airlock. He would get, you know, he already got Miller, Brian, and Harper, and then he gets Jasper and Octavia. And at one point he throws some gas cans down, the same ones that they used in season 1, which I thought was a cool, you know, throwback to that, with the Mountain Men, to knock out Clark and Monty. And, you know, he gets Monty, but he doesn't get Clark. She's able to fight him off and realizes it's Emerson when she takes off the mask. Oh, speaking of which, like I was saying with Octavia, for those of you who thought, well, how did he overcome Octavia? My attitude is, yes, Octavia is a warrior princess, whatnot, but she's only been doing it for a couple months. Whereas Emerson was trained as a soldier for years. Anyway, I digress. So, once, you know, Clark figures out it's Emerson, she goes to get Bellamy to help her, and they realize they need to seal off the motor pool area that Raven and Sinclair are working in. But it's too late because he's already there. He cuts the power, he puts on the night goggles, he tries to jump Raven, but, you know, Sinclair jumps in to save her. He gets in a fight with Emerson, gets knifed, and not exactly a shocking death, but a pretty sad death, because this season, you know, they had set up a lot more with the relationship with Raven and Sinclair. It was this, you know, very nice, like, sort of father-daughter relationship, you know, mentor-apprentice. And he really did sacrifice himself. I mean, he not only is that, he was telling her to get back into the rover where he thought she'd be protected, but she's going out to save them. And, you know, he's kind of dying because the last thing, you know, he's afraid that she'd get caught. She gets caught and then thrown in the airlock with everyone else. And, of course, we have the standoff with, you know, Clark. And she's like, you know, punish me instead of everyone else. I was like, that's not what he's going to do. As soon as he got Bellamy in the airlock, it's like he's going to seal them in. And I'm wondering, how the hell is that airlock still functioning? And why do you still have a functioning airlock? Not just, why would it still work after coming through the Earth, but why would you still have something like an airlock? What good is it to do them on the ground? Don't you think they should have, you know, rigged that thing up so it wasn't, you wouldn't have some situation where someone got locked into it, all the air would be sucked out? But anyway, that's what Emerson does to them. And he's like making Clark watch. Clark gets in a fight with him at one point, and then he's able to get his hands around. Like I said, Clark, once again, she's a warrior princess too, but Emerson's just been doing it longer. And he decides, you know what? No, I'm not going to kill you right here. I'm still going to make you watch. And I'm like, good, because we know he's going to lose, but still, it's one of the things that they do. It's kind of like a little sloppy writing. It's like, dude, you should have shot her in the legs. You know she's a warrior princess type. You know, they call her, what, the mother of death? Or commander of death? I can't remember what he does. It's like, you don't mess around with her. You take her out as soon as you can. But he didn't do that, of course. And then at one point, Clark takes that, you know, commander chip and sticks it in his neck and says the Latin phrase again, Suclo Slacla Sic Semper Tyrannus. You know, I have a sick Tyrannosaurus Rex. And the thing just kills the shit out of him. And, you know, his body starts rejecting it and blood's coming out of his eyes and his mouth. And that's the end of Emerson. And I don't know if anyone's going to mourn that loss or not. I mean, but he was a decent enough antagonist. I mean, when they brought him back that first time, when you realize he's the one that gave the, what's-her-name, Echo, the passcode to blow up Mount Weather. That was pretty interesting. And then they had the dynamic where Clark had to decide his fate, and she lets him go alive, and now he comes back for revenge. But, you know, that's the end of him. It's the end of Sinclair. And then everyone's going their separate ways at the end of it. Some of them staying back in Arcadia to figure out, you know, the logistics of the chip. So once they put it in Luna, they know how to activate it, and she can stop Allie, too. And now moving on to what happened in Polis. So, in Polis, we see Ontario. She's with Murphy, and they're walking in the marketplace, and you get a feel for the type of commander Ontario is. You know, she's amongst her subjects, and they're all offering offering her little trinkets and gifts, and she just like nose in the air, and she just sort of brushes them aside, she's full of herself, basically. And Murphy runs into his old girlfriend, Emery, who's cooking rats, pretending to be a vendor. She starts talking to him, and she's like, I don't know what kind of con you're running, but I want in on it. This is broken up by, Ontario. But a little later, we see Emery and Murphy, they get back together again, and they don't waste any time getting it on. I kind of like how Murphy, after all he's been through, it's nice to see him having some fun. First with Ontario, which I know some of you were upset about that scene, and I thought, he's kind of into it. But we see that his heart's for Emery, and he's talking to her, and they hooked up in the Titus's old dungeon. And while right before they get it on, you see Emery's looking around at all the symbols and whatnot, and this is, her religion as well. But of course she's never been in Titus's dungeon. Only the Flame Keeper apparently could go there, or the commander. And like I said, that was interesting because it's not just higher ups who believe in this nonsense. It's also the lower echelons. And Murphy's telling Emery, he's like, well, I do her bidding. She's taken a liking to me. He's pretty much telling her, I'm her boy toy. I'm just a sex object to her. And Emery would seem pretty chillaxed by that. And I was like, good. If you ever watch Game of Thrones, they had a similar dynamic with, Tyrion, and he had a little Shay, I think it was, he had the prostitute on the side who was his main love, but he has to marry Sasha, and then Shay became all bitchy about it. It's like, but I thought you truly loved me, and it kind of annoyed me because it's like, how does this character not get it? Shay from Game of Thrones, she's a camp follower. She knows how the world works. She knows that Tyrion has got to marry some noble person. And I was concerned that they do the same thing where Emery's all, I thought you and I had a thing. You're having sex with Ontario, but she seemed to, I'm not saying she was, okay with it, but she understood it. She's like, oh, I get it. She's the commander, and she will slice you to bits if you don't do what she says. Okay. We're running a con here. I get how that works. So you go and please her. And of course, this was all a ruse itself. Spoilers once again. As a little later we see Murphy flame-keeping job with Ontario. And they're listening to people's gripes and complaints. In comes this cloaked figure like, okay, who's this? It's going to be someone. Turns out it's Jaha. And they're like, oh, did not see that coming. And Jaha's there trying to tell, he's like, Ontario, I know you're a fake commander. Ontario's like, clear the room. Instead of, kill him now. Which would have been a brighter idea. And as she's talking to Jaha, he's like, Murphy told me. Murphy's like, I didn't tell this asshole anything. I can't stand this guy. Throw him out the window. And then in comes Emery, and you realize, oh, she's taking the chip. Nice surprise there. I gotta give it to you, 100. I did not see that coming. So that's probably the reason she was all okay with Murphy, because she was in Happy Chip County. She took the Kool-Aid, folks. And then Jaha explaining to it is like, hey, you want to be a good commander, you got to take this chip. And, screw this Murphy guy. You got to keep him alive, but he can't be the Flamekeeper. So Murphy gets hauled away. It's like, oh, guess he's back in the shit. Him and Raven. That's why, the one scene with Emerson in the airlock, when he put the knife to Octavia. I mean, I don't have anything against Octavia. It's like, finally, someone else gets cut up. It's like, if someone's going to get hurt in this thing, it's going to be Octavia, not Raven, who's got already fucking arm in the sling. It's like Emerson's like, I got to torture someone to show you I mean business. Go with her. One of them's like, nah, I'll go with this one. Anyway, dole it out. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, that was the end of the Polis thing. We find out Ontario took the chip as well, and now Ali 2 is in the throne. Did have one question. How the fuck did Jaha get there before Kane? You know where Kane, right after the Grounders capture Pike, he goes with them, right? And then a little later, Jaha and Ali 2 take over all of Arcadia. So if he left for Polis, which I guess is a couple days ride from Arcadia, how did he get there before Kane? Because Kane and the Grounders left way before him. Maybe a couple of hours, but yeah. Like I said, they threw it through a loop, and I appreciate that, but still, it's some of the writing here. It's like, really? Did they have any horses in Arcadia? Because the Grounders had horses, probably, to get to Polis, and they weren't going to be putzing around with that when they had Pike, so they should have gotten their way to Polis. And I guess I'm hoping we'll see this next week, where Kane and Pike and the Grounders show up, and then... Yeah, I don't think Pike's going to get it next episode, if that's the case. I think Pike, he's going to join the Chip Cult. It's like, we could use this guy. And Kane. I mean, that'll be interesting. Is, folks, Pike's staying around. That's what I'm saying. So all of those who want to see Pike get it because he killed Lincoln. Well, actually, no, this would work, because then that gives Octavia a chance to do it. But he's not getting it next week. That's my prediction. And that's what I thought of tonight's episode. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't good. It was just meh.